back to Power and Purpose with me, Leon Mann, and Will Troost-Ekong. You might notice there is no Mauro Itoje this week. He sent us a note asking to be excused so he can go and captain England, so we've given him the time off. Will, it's very good of us, I think, to let Mauro off this week, but he's missing a good session, which we're going to tell you more about. But how are you feeling? Just me and you at the wheel.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for today. I know we've got a great guest. Of course, we're going to miss Mauro, but I think we're going to have to allow him for this one time. He's got important things to do. But no, I'm excited to meet our guest and also to pick his brain a bit.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's tell you more about the guest. So for this episode, we're delighted to be speaking to Matt Porter, the CEO of PDC, the Professional Darts Corporation. Matt has had an incredible career. At just 26, he was appointed as the CEO of Leyton Orient Football Club, the youngest CEO in professional football at that time. And since then, he's been climbing higher and higher in the sports industry, and he's been a key figure behind the rapid development of darts. Will, this is another brilliant guest. What are you looking forward to exploring with Matt?
I think I just want to get to know his journey, really. Funny enough, he came up on my Netflix. I was watching the Matchroom documentary, so The Greatest Showman, and he was featured on there. Of course, I already knew quite a lot about him, but it was great to see him in action. But I'm just really interested to get to know how he started his journey and how he's managed to rise to where he is now, because I feel like they're doing so much with darts and a lot of exciting stuff coming up. I'm sure he'll be able to tell us more about that. He sounds like a great guy, and love to know more.
Yeah, absolutely. That Netflix documentary is on our card of questions, so we're definitely going to get into that. So let's welcome the man himself. Let's get Matt Porter to join us now. Matt, thank you so much for joining us on Power and Purpose. We really appreciate your time. How are you doing? How's your day been?
Yeah, I'm good. It's been a rare day, actually, because I've been in the office, which we do try and do as much as we can on a Monday, just to get the week started in the right vein. But a lot of the team travelling back from Germany today, so weren't too many in, but nevertheless, still quite productive.
Thank you so much for joining us. Of course, we've had some time to do some research about you, but then I guess some of the listeners might be the first time that they getting to know your story. So I kind of wanted to take you straight to the start of what we know. Obviously, when you joined the Leyton Orient Football Club and became CEO as a 26-year-old, how did that journey go? How did that happen, and how did you feel during that period?
Yeah, so I started working for Barry and Eddie Hearn in July 2001. It was actually 2 days after I graduated from university, so it wasn't much of a gap year. But I started at Orient in time for that summer. I'd been kind of semi-involved there before because I always wanted to be a journalist, and back in the day of local newspapers, for any listeners old enough to remember those, it was, I was the Orient reporter for a couple of titles in East London, and at the time the football club needed a press officer, another job title that dates me, but I got that job, and 5 years later, after doing that role and doing bits and pieces at Matchroom, obviously the company that owned Leyton Orient back then, Barry asked me if I wanted to be the chief exec. And obviously it was a really exciting opportunity, but it's fair to say that the title was maybe slightly grander than how it may have been perceived. At the time, I think there was only 4 of us in the office, and the club was a much smaller operation than what it is now. It was, although we had a website, these were the pre-social media days. There wasn't a lot of digital activity. There wasn't, things like fan engagement didn't really exist. Stadium was a lot more limited. But nevertheless, it was a great opportunity for me. It was the club I'd grown up supporting, the club I loved. And I had a good relationship, a good rapport with the fan base and the staff. So just kind of got stuck straight into it, really, and had 8 great years. We got promoted from League One, and my last match as CEO was at Wembley, a playoff final. Sadly, we lost.
Wow.
But I felt like we really set the club up in a good way, which was then all massively undone straight away by the person who bought it from Barry, which I won't talk too much about that, but there were 3 really bad years. And then I went straight back in after that as a director, working with a consortium of mostly American-based businessmen who bought the club back in 2017. They're still on the board there now. So, and in fact, we lost in the playoff final again this summer, just gone. So it's been a familiar tale, sadly.
And how was that? So when you started, and obviously getting a responsibility, even though it might not have been as grand as it is now, or how football business is now, did you still feel like they gave you your space to develop your ideas or really implement the things that you might have seen with fresh eyes, or even as a fan, and then, you know, journalist background to then PR to then, you know, being able to implement those ideas really?
Yeah, I had to learn quickly. You know, I wasn't an accountant, I wasn't a lawyer, I wasn't from a business background, I was from a media background, you know, so I had to adapt and I had to pick things up and learn on the job. And one of the things I realised quite quickly was that as the youngest member of staff, one of the only ways I could progress would be to make sure that I had the respect and commitment from the other staff members around me. So I made sure that we created a culture that empowered people and people enjoyed coming to work in, gave people the freedom to make their own decisions in the same way that Barry gave me freedom to make my decisions, you know. And you give someone enough rope to get close to the edge. You don't want them to fall off, but you want them to get close and be brave and make the decisions that they believe in. And if you see it going a little bit the wrong way, then you rein it back in a little bit and you talk about it and see what you could do differently. So we created a culture of really strong work ethic, really strong financial discipline, really strong creativity. We tried to make sure that decisions were made quickly and for the right reasons. And obviously in football, you know, as you guys both know, the kind of opinions and the mood of the fan base is all important, and it can mask a huge amount of things. You know, the size of my inbox on a Monday morning was directly related to the team's results. If the team won, the match day experience, or, you know, all of that sort of stuff was really kind of irrelevant. Yet if the team lost, you could put on the best stadium with the best facilities for fans and the best you know, restaurant and shop and all of that sort of stuff, and nobody was happy, because football is just purely results-based business. So we learned to deal with that, and we learned to keep people bubbling over. You know, when the team was struggling, how do you convince the groundsman and the shop manager and all those people that it's not their fault and it's still got to come to work on a Monday with a smile on their face? And I think we did okay at it. You know, we were a small team, and we got everybody pulling in the same direction. We had, you know, two really great managers I was lucky enough to have with me when I was chief exec. One was Martin Ling, who's the club's director of football now, and one was Russell Slade. And both of those really helped create that culture of togetherness, hard work, and generally if you've got that culture right, you can get that 5% extra out of people, and that's the margin you need. You know, it's not. It's everything's such fine margins, and you make your own luck, and you get your own rub of the green by the effort that you put in and the preparation that you make. So by creating that kind of culture and getting everybody pulling in the same direction, we managed to be moderately successful.
So as a fresh-faced 26-year-old, and now you find yourself in a room with people with different experiences, right? Would you say that the key thing there would have been listening to those people to try and understand what they wanted to do? And how much would you then also say, okay, listening to maybe the fan base on a Monday morning would affect what you would then decide to do for the next week, I don't know, or game to game, as that's how it is really in the football business?
Yeah, listening's number one. And asking questions is shortly behind it. You know, you need to be inquisitive, you need to be curious, you need to be broad-minded and open to different perceptions and ideas. But you also have to have courage in your own convictions. I think if I was to look back at my 26-year-old self back then, I would say I was probably too easily led by some older voices and more experienced voices. And actually, when I look back on some of the opinions that I had, even in the short term, then I'd maybe make a decision, and then a couple of weeks later, I think to myself, I wish I'd have trusted my own judgment and my own gut instinct on things. But when you're 26 and you're surrounded by people who are 20, 30 years older than you, who've been doing it for 20 or 30 years, it's really hard to be brave enough to believe in yourself that much. And I don't think I had that about me now. I don't think I had that about me then, which I do now from the benefit of experience. And it's something that when I look at younger staff who I work with now, I really try and encourage them to believe in what they're doing. And ultimately, you know, number one is if you don't believe in what you're doing, you won't do it to the best of your ability and with full conviction. And number two is the only way you learn is by getting it wrong anyway. So don't worry about making the mistake. As long as you're making the mistake for the right reason and the mistake's been limited in terms of the damage that it's caused, you can learn from it and you can move on. You know, we learned with the fan base, if we were honest with them, tell them the truth. This is why we did this. This is why we sold this player. This is why we put ticket prices up. This is why there's no replica shirts left in the shop, whatever. Just tell them the truth. And then not everyone will like the answer, but they've got no choice to accept it. You know, you have to be transparent and be upfront with people, whether that's staff or members of the public.
Yeah. And when you started, was that, do you remember like a specific moment throughout your career? So if you fast forward also to now, where you said, okay, this was the moment where I said, okay, I'm going to listen to my gut feeling now, and it's no longer being led by maybe older voices? Or is that just something that kind of gradually comes? Because I think anyone who's listening to this and dreams of having your role, for example, how would they know, okay, this is a moment, or this is the experience that I got, that I can now really trust myself and say, this is how we're doing stuff, and I'm happy to kind of live and die by that sword and decision?
Yeah, I don't think there was one specific moment, but I think over time you start to think, well, I should have done that, and I thought I should have done that at the time. And then a week later you think, do you know what, I thought that again. And then after you start to believe, then you start to have that courage in your own convictions and that confidence in your own ability. And you start thinking time after time, I wish I'd have done what I wanted to do, not what, I'm not saying it was the easy option, but it was maybe the obvious option to do what you felt was what older people or more experienced people were, or people with, you know, all sorts of qualifications or whatever were doing. But, and sometimes you do obviously have to do what, you know, what the, you know, the mood dictates like that. But when you've a few times in relatively quick succession, you've felt that you should have trusted your own instinct more. That's when gradually, for me, it felt like that confidence built over time rather than like a light bulb moment as such. It was just a gradual progression.
Okay, and you also touched on culture, because I find that so interesting, because I talk about it with teams, because I think it's the same maybe in the boardroom as it is in the dressing room, about, you know, what you create and how that actually propels something further. So even when, you know, maybe most people would have been watching as well the new Netflix series on Matchroom, you can see that there's, from an outsider perspective, such a great culture that I think drives all of you guys in the same direction. And how did you find that at the beginning at Orient, or was that something maybe that you got from Barry Hearn at the time, to say, okay, this is how we're going to do things, and how has that helped you to progress both at Leyton, Orient, but maybe also in the role that you're in now?
Yeah, I mean, look, Barry's obviously that kind of character who brings people together. You know, he's very positive. He's big on people enjoying themselves and believes that the more you enjoy yourself, the more you're going to put into the role and the more you're going to get out of it. But you reference like the dressing room and the boardroom. For me, they should be unified. That should be a combined approach. You know, there shouldn't be like a them and us. You know, I hate it when I hear people say, oh, the football side and the business side or whatever. It's a club. It's a club. And the reason that a small club with limited resources can succeed against bigger clubs with wider resources is because of mentality and approach and culture. You know, you can't have arrogance, you can't have complacence. I'm not saying you want a total siege mentality, but you need a them and us. You need to believe in the person who stood next to you, and they need to believe in you back. You know, and whether that person's wearing a suit or a football kit, they need to be able to stand together and move forward. It might sound a bit corny or a bit cliched, but, you know, I've lived through it, and I'm telling you, it's what works. You know, anybody who thinks that a club of the size of Leyton Orient can get to being one match away from playing in the Championship, when you've got clubs like, you know, if I look this time, you know, when we lost with clubs like Bolton, Huddersfield, Reading, Wigan, you know, and a Charlton with a team that beat us, but Birmingham, Wrexham, like the teams that were in the division, the financial resources that were available to them, the reason we could compete with them and the reason we could get to that point, and it was the same back in 2006 when we got promoted from League Two, it's the same in 2014 when we got to the playoff final then. The reason we could do that was because of the way that the club was unified and everybody felt the same. And again, it's just what gets that little bit of extra margin out of people, because they want to do it for the person who stood next to them.
Amazing.
Matt, I wanted to explore your relationship with the Hearns, because let's take it back to where it started. Like, what do you think Barry saw in you to say, right, this is my CEO, 26, I don't care, he's ready, he's the person I want to lead?
I grafted. I did not stop grafting, and I'm not saying I do now, but when you're 45, you don't have the same energy as you do when you're 21. But you try your best. Look, for me, it was about. It's not a job. It's never been a job. It's my life, and it's very different. It's very different when you look at it like that. I don't clock off. I don't. Even if I'm not on my emails, my brain's still going. I don't think about anything else. And you can compartmentalize. You obviously have times when you're with your family or you with your friends or whatever, and you're focusing on that. But there's always work stuff going on in the background and thinking about why did I make that decision? What's the next decision I'm going to make? What are we going to do next week? What am I going to do about that? You can't think of it as a 9 to 5 or a Monday to Friday. You've got to buy into it. You're either all in or you're all out. You can't be like half-hearted with it. And I think that culture was instilled in me from the very first day by Barry, and I think I probably had it naturally anyway. And you sacrifice. You go through your 20s and 30s, and look, you can't make it as a professional sports person if you don't have that mentality, and you can't make it in business if you don't have that mentality as well. And some people, and this isn't a criticism of them, but they will struggle to sacrifice, and they'll struggle to do the extra mile because it's not the easy option, or there's something a bit more fun to be done, or something like that. And again, that isn't a criticism, because people have got to do what's right for them in their life. But there's a certain ceiling that you can't break through unless you've got, again, the margin, just that little bit more. It's not 100% more than other people. It's not 80% more. Sometimes it's only like 2, 3, 5% more. You've got to be able to deliver that.
And we see that, and we recognize that so much, I think, in anyone that we've had on or we spoke to, they've got that certain drive and real willingness to do something. And often is that related to someone's purpose and what they actually really want to achieve, that might be bigger than being a CEO of Leyton Orient, or being where you are now with Matchroom. So would you say when you were younger you had like a clear purpose, like I want to be the boss of this, or I want to do that? Or what has been the thing that really drives you, which you say, the grafting that makes you go for those extra percentages and break that ceiling?
Yeah, I think I was brought up in a hard-working environment. My parents were hard-working, and to contradict kind of what I've said, that I only wanted to be a journalist throughout my whole teenage years and everything like that. I just wanted to write about football and sport. And I did, and then I started doing bits of radio as well. And I thought, I've got a career path here as in the media. And then the Orient opportunity came out of nowhere. And I was kind of, when I became the CEO, and look, I was 26. I was driving Barry to an FA Cup press day. We had Charlton in the 4th round of the FA Cup. And he said to me, "Would you like to be the CEO of Leyton Orient Football?" He said, "How would you feel if I asked you to be if I asked you to be the CEO of Leyton Orient Football Club?" And I said, "I would be honoured." And he said, "That's good enough for me." And that was as far as it went, And he said, "Look, you're not ready, but I want to give you the chance to become ready, and I'll give you enough opportunities to succeed and stop you from failing." And that was the kind of relationship we had. And then, I guess after all those years have passed, he sort of lets you a bit freer now. I saw him today for quite a while, and he's still on it. He's still so sharp and on everything. But he does give us, it's not just myself, Frank who runs the boxing, everyone who's across each department. We have enough freedom to make our own decisions, but probably because he feels we've earned it.
Matt, that comes across so well in the documentary, the Netflix series, sorry. Like Will and I were talking about how much we've been enjoying watching that series. And when you talk about graft and when you talk about ambition, like that comes across from absolutely everybody who's featured in that Netflix series. I just wondered what it was like to work with Eddie and Barry, because you get the impression that it might be 11:45 on a Sunday night and something's going on and there's an expectation that you're going to get back to that message. Now, some people would say, isn't that amazing, the level of commitment? And some people would say, wow, boundaries are getting crossed here in terms of how we live our lives. I'm really interested to get your perspective, because I think people will have different views on it. And also, what is it actually like to work with those guys? Because I think there's what we see from the outside in, and then there's the reality of it when you're day to day in that office.
Yeah, look, I think in terms of the expectation levels and everything like that, they're set from day one. So if you're not prepared to meet them, then you won't go on the journey, and you probably wouldn't have been identified as somebody in the first place. Almost nobody who progresses at Matchroom leaves. Almost nobody. I think I've been there 25 years, and I think I'm only just in the top 10 longest serving staff. Now we've got to maybe we're like 100 staff or something now, but 4 or 5 years ago we were still at 30. The growth has been since COVID and in recent years. And I think, to be fair to Eddie, I think Eddie's the one who's really spearheaded taking the business to the next level. Barry built it and formed it in 1982 and got the boxing started, snooker, darts, the multi-sport business, has been the visionary who got it off the ground. But by his own admission, Barry is cautious, he's risk averse, and maybe his vision has a more confined boundary to Eddie's.
It might have been completed by now.
Maybe. That's a good point. That's a good point. He's in his late 70s. He's achieved, he's got an OBE. He's written his autobiography. He's been a star of a Netflix documentary. I don't know how many more mountains he has left to climb, in that respect. But that hasn't stopped his drive and his ambition. It might just mean he's retracing the steps he may have already taken in some areas. I don't know. I'm sure he'd be happy to come on and talk about it, But but I think, like I say, I think Eddie's got a wider, probably a little bit more of the new world. Like the Barry's world is not, the world of social media and globalization and all that. It's different now, and Eddie gets that, and Barry gets it too, but he's got a more backward seat now as Eddie drives it forward.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting that dynamic with Eddie and Barry, because you get that. It's a beautiful thing, I think, because you see Eddie in succession planning mode, but also Barry taking a backward step and being open to that. Obviously, he's had his health challenges, which come out through the Netflix series as well. But there's a lot of there's a lot of depth to their conversations, even though it feels at times like it's from The Only Way is Essex in terms of how it's kind of put together, which is incredible.
I think they call it brilliant reality.
Yeah, I mean, but it's compelling viewing. It really is compelling viewing. But at the heart of it, there is, how do we drive further forward? And to many people, they'll be saying, "Gosh, you're sat in an incredible mansion. You're doing all this incredible work across all these different sports. Like, where is the end for you guys?" But then this dynamic is just something very, very special. So it feels very real, Matt.
Yeah, I think it's a shared passion, isn't it? You can't drive whatever you're doing in life. If you haven't got passion for it, you're not going to take it forward. You can have all the ability in the world. If you don't like what you're doing, you're not going to have the desire to get there in the same way you are as if you love it. You have to have that passion. You have to have that vision and drive. And, you talk about the end goal. There might not be an end goal, because the boundaries might just keep opening up and new opportunities might keep opening up. Who'd have thought 5 years ago that, Saudi, who'd have thought 10, 15 years ago that streaming platforms, all of these things that didn't exist before, that have come into our ecosystem and have given us opportunities. What's next? There'll be something else, and then it's about having the passion to walk through that door and take that opportunity. So I think that's, the fact that they both share that passion, and obviously it must be one of the hereditary factors that's been passed on from Bazza to Eddie. I think that's the key, isn't it? Because Eddie could have just sat there and gone, "Oh, I'm made now," because as Barry calls him, the silver spoon kid or whatever. He's like, "I'm made now. I don't need to work." But he hasn't taken that attitude. Eddie's worked. He's proved his own name. He's proved his own worth, and he loves boxing and he has passion for the other parts of the business too. But obviously, boxing's his main driver, and he just wants to take it forward. So, that's something that we reflect in our own businesses. I'm the same with the darts. I didn't grow up with darts in my family or anything like that. It's a business I found myself in, but the passion that I have for delivering that show and that entertainment factor, we have got, without any shadow of a doubt, the hottest property in sport at the moment. Like the appetite for darts is frightening. Everywhere we go, I mean, the advantage is everybody knows what a dartboard is, so we're not doing a hard sell from the start. People know what darts is, but a lot of the time they don't know it as a professional sport. They only know it as a fun sport you play with your mates in the garage or the man cave or the fairground or whatever. So we're taking people on that journey to convert them into understanding that the sport is a professional sport that's played in front of thousands of people for millions of pounds. And it's so exciting because there's no limit to where we can go with this either. And I think that's part of it. If you were doing, if we say we were promoting the World Cup, and we know it's going to be in 8 years' time, and we're building stadiums and we're putting infrastructure in place, and then the teams qualify and everyone turns up and they play the World Cup, and then it's done. And then someone else does the next World Cup, and you're done. And I'm sure you'd get a lot of satisfaction out of that. But it's very different to what we're doing, which is just an ongoing process of building all the time.
I think it's so obvious because I was even hearing you speak, you can feel your passion. And I think when I watched that docuseries, I mean, it's so obvious. The first thing for me as well is the passion across anyone that you see on screen. And I think I want to, also give credit, I think, to Barry, because I think what he's done so well, which you alluded to before, is seeing that vision and maybe selecting the right people to give them that freedom to carry on expressing themselves and indulge themselves further in that passion, which then grows the business. Because I think if you have that as your driving factor, then, like you said, where's the sky's the limit. But you mentioned it briefly about what's next, and obviously now having Eddie maybe taking the reins a little bit more. What does that look like for you? What's next under that next vision for darts and what you guys are planning now?
Yeah, I mean, the fortunate position I'm in is that I'm as much as Barry, and also Eddie pay interest in what I'm doing, I'm kind of left alone to run the darts, which is great for me because it gives me the opportunity to be flexible and make decisions and deliver a product, manage the team, etc., which, I'm very thankful for, that they have that level of trust in me to run it. So to that extent, it's about, it adds pressure and it adds accountability. If I was just doing what Barry told me to do every day, there'd be no pressure on me, no accountability. I wouldn't be responsible for anything because I'd just say, well, you told me to do that, Barry. It didn't work. What shall I do next? But it's not like that, and that actually really helps you because you get more satisfaction out of achieving something, and you learn more about when something you decide to do goes wrong or you could have done it differently. So for me, it's about, what are we going to do to take this sport to the same level that golf or tennis or other individual sports are around the world? Because we know in the UK, we've got a massive product. Everybody knows what the product is. Everyone watches it on TV. People go to the events, sponsors everywhere. That's great. Germany, getting there, pretty much the same. Netherlands, not far behind. Eastern Europe, Scandinavia, all these markets that are developing for us. Australia and New Zealand, America and Canada, all these places around the world. Southeast Asia, there's tens of thousands of players in Southeast Asia. How can we get a hold of that and make superstars out of Filipino, Japanese, Hong Kong dart players? Because there's talent there, but we've got to harness it. We've got to invest. We've got to have the right product to take into each market, because you can't just plonk the same thing in any country. It needs little bits of tweaking depending on what that territory needs to be satisfied with. And that's exciting now because we've built up the resources over the years and the expertise over the years to be able to deliver. And we're now going to have the opportunity over the years to come by having our anchor contracts in place. Like, we've got some major broadcast contracts in place that underpin the foundation of the company, gives us the opportunity to know we're going to pay the prize money. We know we're going to pay the wages. We know we're going to pay the bills. We know we're going to deliver the events. So we haven't got that worry and that stress that, to be fair, a lot of new sports or sports that don't have as much resource, they might struggle with that. But if we know that we've got the foundations, then we can start to build in other areas. So how can we go back to what I said before about everybody knows what a dartboard is, people have played it at amateur level. How can we convert them in other countries to people who are either ambitious to play or keen to watch and engage with us on social media, etc.? And that's really exciting. That's where the sport's going to go next. What you're seeing now in the UK will be, give or take, roughly what you'll see in the UK, because you don't want to oversaturate the market. So it's the growth we're going to have in new markets that will be exciting.
One of the lines of the Netflix series that just stopped me completely and stunned me was when Eddie says, darts makes more money than boxing for Matchroom. Now, the line was there. I kind of pressed pause and hit Google and tried to, and chat
Leon, hang on. You pressed pause at the wrong point. You pressed pause at the wrong point, because his next line was, I'm jealous of Matt.
Yes, it was. It was when I got off that. So, but I want to use this opportunity, this very unique opportunity and privilege, to say how does darts make more money than boxing? Because I think a lot of people would have been probably shocked at that point, just because of what they see and perceive from boxing and see and perceive from darts.
Yeah, so there are a couple of differences that are pretty critical to why this happens. Number one is we have content almost every week. Boxing has a good number of shows throughout the year, but it's not 52 weeks a year, so it doesn't have as many opportunities. Number two is we have a lot more surety. We know what tournaments we're going to stage, where they're going to be, how many tickets we're going to sell. We're pretty confident of that, what the sponsorship's going to be, what the TV revenue is going to be, etc. Boxing's a lot more opportunistic. Two fighters win, great, let's pair them together. They can fight in 4 months, 5 months, whatever. But guess what? One of them's just broken his wrist. So the fight's postponed. Oh dear, well, that fight was going to make 5 million quid. Yeah, but it's not on anymore. If a dart player breaks his wrist, another dart player will play instead, and everybody still turns up, and the cameras still roll, and the show still goes on. So boxing is a lot more high risk in that respect. It's obviously a more fragmented business. There's a lot of different places if you're a boxer to go and have a fight. Whereas in darts, the PDC is the only opportunity for a professional player to play. So there are some fundamental differences. Our boxing, over recent years, we've had some real high-profile fighters, not least Anthony Joshua, obviously, who maybe in previous years have had 2, 3, 4 pay-per-view fights that have been big revenue generators. That's not quite happening the same at the moment. It's cyclical, so I'm sure, there'll be another superstar coming out of the woodwork. But it can be quite up and down, the boxing business, whereas the darts business is a lot more solid and stable in that respect. But it's good because the money that a lot of the money that we make, the opportunity for us to reinvest in the sport is there, and that helps us grow. The overseas development funds, the money we invest into junior darts and things like that. If we weren't making profit, we wouldn't be able to grow the sport in that respect.
My big question here is, of course, we spoke so much about growth, and you repeated several questions again that you use to kind of identify how you need to adapt to certain markets. So I'm currently in Saudi Arabia, not far from Riyadh. Mm-hmm. And of course, I understand that is also a market that you're looking at. And I just, wanted to know, how can you make that experience as exciting in, a Muslim country where there might not be as much drinking, different sponsors allowed, maybe the betting, the things that maybe people would associate with darts. And what's the plan for that, if you can share anything about that already?
Yeah, it will be different. There's no doubt about that. Riyadh season's obviously got a huge portfolio of fantastic events across multiple genres, not just sport, comedy, film, family entertainment, all those sort of things. So it's a wide-ranging program of events for local people, and obviously for the international market through broadcast as well. So darts will be in Saudi for the first time in January. It's unlikely it will feel exactly the same as Alexandra Palace, for example. The crowd at darts normally like to have a drink and enjoy themselves. I'm sure the crowd in Saudi will enjoy themselves, but they obviously won't be having a drink, which we would obviously respect. But the show will be the same. The players will be the same. They'll be playing to the same standard. The broadcast will look the same. So we'll still deliver the same product. And I think, it's important wherever we go. When we went to Tokyo, we had to adapt the product. When we go to America, we adapt the product. There's different regional variations everywhere we go. So Saudi's variations are just maybe some that we haven't come across before. but they're massively passionate about sport. They invest in a lot of different sports, and it's exciting to be taking darts there for the first time. There's a big expat community in Saudi Arabia, a lot of European expats. You have to assume that the majority of the crowd that turn up will be, there because they'll know the sport more than the Saudis will. But everything has to start somewhere, So we'll do the event, and and we'll learn from it and see where we go.
Amazing! I can't wait. I'm gonna hopefully be able to get down in January. Yeah, I'll definitely come down.
Good.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Good.
Sounds great. Matt, the transformation of darts into this like global entertainment brand, it's quite remarkable. What do you think are the key things that you've done or you've been involved in driving that have taken you in such a relatively short space of time from where you were to where you are now, where like darts, as you say, it's like a cultural thing that people are so invested in?
I think the best success stories in terms of atmosphere and growth are the organic ones. I think when an entity tries to impose something on people, they don't buy into it as much as if they're the ones who create it themselves. And in darts, the culture of darts, the atmosphere of darts, it's all come from the crowd. It's all been dictated by the crowd. They've told us that they enjoy it. We didn't really do anything particularly special. We just put two blokes on stage and they threw darts. And then the winner went through and played again, and the loser went home. It wasn't rocket science, but the for whatever reason, the public in countries where the culture is aligned have really picked up on it and bought into it. And I think there are a number of factors to consider. Right, number one is obviously it's a very social event to watch with your friends. So generally, people come in big groups. If they're in big groups, they're tending to enjoy themselves because they're out for a social occasion, whether it's family, friends, whatever. Two is, unlike most other sports, the result is not the most important thing for the crowd. In most sports, people only care, and I think I talked about this earlier with football, people only care about the result. In darts, you might have a favourite player, you might want so-and-so to win against so-and-so, but no one leaves in tears because someone lost. And then if one game's not particularly exciting, it doesn't matter because there's another game along in a minute. With most sessions, some have up to 8 games, some have 4, so there's generally a lot of entertainment going on, and it's fast paced, and we put fan engagement tools on during the break, competitions, cameras, all sorts of quizzes, all sorts of things to keep people entertained. So it's just like a non-stop feed of entertainment and atmosphere. We don't like to have any dead time in it at all. Another thing we did, we don't let people come in football shirts. We took the tribalism out of darts completely. Like, we don't want a table of Arsenal fans sat next to a table of Tottenham fans because it just changes the dynamic of the occasion. You want it to be neutral, you want it to be fun, you want it to be people there to enjoy themselves, and it's just grown from there. We were saying we'd love to find the first ever person who came to darts in fancy dress. Like, why did they do it? In the days before anybody did it, why did somebody at one point say, I'm going to go dressed as a Smurf tonight, because that's created its own culture, hasn't it? Like, if you come to Ali Pali at Christmas now and you're not in fancy dress, the first thing you do when you walk through the door is go, oh, I wish I'd have worn fancy dress, because everybody's wearing it, and it's organic. It's grown from the bottom up, and all we've done is feed it. We've just fed the appetite for it.
And Matt, we've opened up the opportunity to our community to send us some questions in, and we're not going to get through all the questions for anyone who's listening out just for their question, unfortunately. But there is one question that is from Bam. So Bam sent in this question. He says, "Do you think rugby can learn from darts? If so, how? Or is the darts effect too unique to replicate?" Now, I'm assuming Bam was thinking that Mauro was going to be with us and he was going to ask this question, but I thought it was a really good one and kind of fits nicely off the back of everything you're talking about, the uniqueness and this organic side of darts. Is it something that can't be replicated?
Look, I think there's another factor as well that I haven't really touched upon, and that's how easy it is to play a game of darts. It's not expensive. You don't need a lot of space. You don't need to be from a certain background. You don't need to be from an academy. You don't need to have had coaching. You just pick up a dart and throw it. And a 10-year-old boy can play against a 90-year-old woman. I could be playing you now on a video call. It's got some quite unique facets as a sport, a totally different field of play where the opponents don't interact with each other and I can't block you. Do you know what I mean? So darts is really easy just to play. And I think one of the challenges maybe rugby has is that it's not as easy just to play. I went to school a long time ago, but the school I went to didn't play rugby. So I didn't grow up playing rugby. So as a result of that, rugby's never really been part of my life. Now, obviously I've got into darts, and I said earlier it wasn't part of my life either growing up, but it just so happens to have been my job. But the point is, if you're into a sport which is widely played or easy to get into and play, then you're more likely to carry that on through you. So I think, if I look at rugby, like my 8-year-old boy, he started playing rugby in school. And it's obviously, non-contact, touch rugby, whatever, with the Velcro tags and stuff like that. And that's great. But his teacher, who is a big rugby fan, I think he was involved with Saracens for a while. He said it's so challenging now because of the issue around head injuries and things like that. You've got to kind of move with the times and reinvent yourself. And I'm not talking about rugby specifically because I don't know enough about it. But you've got to deliver a product that the market wants and the market can get. If you're out of reach, I think one of the advantages about darts is the authenticity of the players. If you're a teenager growing up in the UK now, and you look at Jude Bellingham or you look at Leah Williamson, right, and you can say to yourself, I will never be them. That I will never ever be them. You could look at Luke Littler and you could think, I could be him. That could be me. And there's a difference there. And I think a lot of sports, and again, I'm not referencing rugby, so please hope you don't get loads of messages saying he was putting off rugby, because I'm not. But a lot of sports need to look at themselves and say, are we delivering what the modern market actually wants? And the market will tell you, like I say about the atmosphere at darts, people will tell you what they want. You've got to listen, you've got to react, and you've got to deliver it. Otherwise, you'll get left behind.
And I think just touching on that, because obviously when I watch darts now, of course the entry level for athleticism probably is a lot lower. I mean, we also see guys or women who are maybe not built very athletically, but the talent that is on display is insane. Because of course I've had a go on a darts board, and just getting it on the board is hard enough already. But I think when I see that, and also maybe the crowd that you see. Maybe most obviously for me in Ali Pali when I watch it on TV in the UK. What are you guys doing to get the next young generation? Because if I ask my 7-year-old, he probably hasn't even thought about darts yet, but he's been exposed straight away to football or rugby. But like you said, it might be difficult for him because he doesn't know, he can't run as fast as some other kids. But what are you guys doing specifically to say, okay, how can we inspire the next generation of kids to be like, I want to be Luke Littler next?
Yeah, I mean, I think your point about, first of all, I think your point about athleticism is accurate. But I would also say that the modern player has to have, with the demands on them as a player with a 52-week circuit and playing in 20 countries, you've got to have a level. It's not like the old days where these were guys out of a pub sinking 10 pints. That isn't going to work in the modern world. And you see that, you look at a Luke Humphries, like Nathan Aspinall was in the media this week talking about how he's running again and going to the gym and stuff like that. Gerwyn Price was a former professional rugby player. The guys who look after themselves in the long run are the guys who will succeed. And the profile of a dart player is younger and fitter now than it ever has been because the rewards are there. But, it's also still an accessible sport where people who, as you say, don't have that level of athleticism can still participate. So, I think in that respect, it's about getting kids into it. Your boy at 7, it's about the age. Obviously my boy is a bit easier for him to follow darts because his dad works in it. But at this sort of age now, they'll start to pick up hobbies that will stick with them for life. So we've got a partner organisation, the Junior Darts Corporation, which is the system that Luke Littler came through, and plenty of others. I mean, about a third of the World Championship field have played in our development tour, which is for 16 to 23-year-olds. So kids aren't learning in the pub anymore. Kids are learning at home. And they're learning because it's an accessible sport, an affordable sport, a sport that their parents can easily get them into We've just got to create those opportunities. So by building academies, we've got a Key Stage 2 maths program that we're rolling out in schools. We've got a community initiative that we're working with, a charity that does a lot with youth centres, particularly in deprived areas. We're trying to get the sport in front of as many people as possible, because not everybody has pay TV, or not everybody wants to watch, TV on a Sunday night. But that doesn't mean that they can't engage with darts as well. So for us, in order to preserve the future of the sport and to grow it, we're just working on getting more and more young people involved in the sport, while still servicing our core audience. A lot of sports make the mistake of forgetting about their legacy audience. Football clubs do it a lot. Football clubs don't think about the 55-year-old fan who's been a season ticket holder for 40 years. They only think about the bloke who lives, or woman who lives 2 miles down the road, who doesn't go to games. And you can't forget about your core fan as well, because ultimately you need that regular loyalty that they will give you. So we're sort of servicing two audiences. It's the new audience who've come into the sport since COVID. COVID was really, really good for darts. I know it sounds a bad thing to say, but a lot of people took up darts during COVID. It was, like I said earlier, you could play each other on a video call. You could play each other on a different dartboard in a different house. We were one of the first sports to get our professional tournaments back up and running again. You couldn't buy equipment for love nor money, because obviously it wasn't being manufactured, and yet it was all sold out. So everyone was taking up darts during COVID. And then obviously Luke Littler's emergence has given us a younger fan base as well. So with those two factors, we've really, over the last 5 years, been able to build the number of younger people that are engaging with us.
Matt, I wanted to bring it back to you as a leader, because clearly I think you're too humble to say you're behind a lot of this success, but your presence has clearly had something to do with it, right? So what would you say your proudest moment has been as PDC CEO?
My proudest moment was actually the first World Championship, the COVID World Championship, if you like. Not the one that was behind closed doors, but the one where we got crowds back. We'd gone through the whole process of bubbles, and that was probably along the where we had these bubble events where people were tested, had to stay in the hotel rooms, and then played in dry environments and everything like that. Logistically, to get that up and running, I did a lot of work then. And look, I'm not, as much as I love working for Barry and Eddie, I'm not like them in terms of my hype. Do you know what I mean? So I'm a bit more low key than that. But I did well during COVID, and we as a team, did really well to get darts going again. And then that World Championship, when there was Peter Wright v Michael Smith in the final, when we delivered that, and I knew that tournament was going to come to an end without having been closed down, without any COVID outbreaks, without anything like that. That to me felt like it was a real sense of achievement, because it gave people such a welcome distraction from what had become a really, challenging time for everybody.
Amazing. And Matt, what I want to do now is what we're calling a rapid fire round, right? So I've got some quick fire questions, and hopefully this works. But we'll give it a go and see how we go. So first question: one word that defines leadership for you.
Accountability.
Accountability. Love it. Right. Second one: your biggest leadership mistake.
Not trusting my own instinct in the early days, like I referenced before.
Best advice you have ever received?
Everything Barry said to me for the first couple of years.
I like it. And a final one from me. Who's a leader you admire outside of sport?
That's a great question. I only follow sport. I don't know anything else about the world.
Do you know what?
And I'm not going to say a politician. I'm definitely not going to say a politician.
Oh, no, yeah.
No, I need to come up with someone. Right. That's terrible.
No. Don't. This is the level of commitment,
Do you know what?
Do
you know what I'm going to say? No, let me say one. My son's headmaster. And actually, my daughter started going to that school now, because the culture he's created at that school, and the way that he has built the school up. The school, it struggled again, COVID, reference COVID, it struggled during COVID, and he's built it back up. He's created a culture of learning and enjoyable learning. And I obviously don't know every parent at the school, but I don't know anybody who's got a bad word to say about him. And I'm not going to embarrass him or say the name of the school. But needless to say, he does come to Ali Pali and have a few pints.
Well, it sounds like he's earned them. He's earned them for sure. Matt, I've got a fascination because I chair a lot of meetings in my kind of day-to-day work in sport and media and beyond. And I'm part of meetings where I see chairs do a good job and not such a good job. In your world, you'll be chairing meetings a lot. Like, could you give us your take on how you chair a meeting well? Because a lot of the listeners will be chairing their own meetings, whether they're in schools, sports teams, whatever it will be. And I think that we need good practice out there for chairing meetings, because I'm part of meetings where we're not chairing meetings very well. So what better person to ask than yourself?
So you have to listen. The first thing is you have to listen. I don't force everybody to have an input. I don't say that everybody has to say something, because that's not right. And some people don't want to contribute, or you'll just end up with the same answer time after time. And you go into some meetings and they go around the table and everybody has to say anything. I don't agree with that. But you need to listen, and you need to have a focus on a small number of core issues and do them right. Don't spread it so thin. Don't get stuck in the weeds. What's your ambition? What's your aim? What's your agenda? What do you want to get out of it? Focus on that and how you can deliver it. And then delegate. Employ people. One of the hardest skills to learn is delegation, because especially if you've come from an environment where everything's quite confined, you do everything yourself. And it's really hard to trust other people to do it, but actually it's the best skill to learn once you've delegated. So if you're in a meeting, if you're chairing a meeting, think about what roles and responsibilities are the other people around the table going to be doing. If they're not going to be doing anything, why are they in the meeting? Make sure everybody's got a role and responsibility, even if they're shadowing someone or working as a pair or a team or whatever. They don't have to be out there on their own, but make sure everybody's got a purpose for being there. Listen to them. Make sure everybody understands the situation, and then trust them to go on and do it. Empower them to go on and do it, because otherwise they won't improve. If you haven't employed people who are better than you or have got the ability to be better than you, you haven't employed the right people. Don't employ people and then just say, oh no, it's my way or the highway or whatever. You have to employ people who've got the right skill set to take the company forward, and you can't have every skill yourself. But my job's just like moving chess pieces around the board. It's the chess pieces that are going to do all the work. They're going to take the opponents out. I'm just nudging them around the board, making sure they don't get lost.
Oh, I love that analogy.
We've touched on delegation so much in previous episodes, and I think it's something that is not underrated, but something maybe not spoken about enough. So I think it's great to hear, and especially with your chessboard analogy.
Don't be frightened of it. It's a strength. It's a strength. If I go back to football, right, the best football managers, without a doubt, and I don't know if you'll agree with me on this, Will, the best football managers are the ones who will not be frightened to say they got it wrong or it went wrong, because they'll have enough faith in their own ability to put it right. It's when it's just constantly like a cover up and denial and stuff like that. That's not going to change. Plan B isn't do plan A more. Don't be frightened to go to plan B or C or D. If you got it wrong, that's no problem, because if you're good enough, you'll know how to put it right.
That's amazing. And I think, for me, you come across as a real leader. And that's for my world. If I were to talk about managers or different people, even in the boardroom, or great captains that I've played with, they always mention similar things, skills that you've talked about. So if I was talking about Matt now and your situation and everything that's ahead of you, with the power that lies in your hands, even though might not be the one throwing the darts with it, what would you like to do with that? What is the vision now for Matt Porter as a powerful leader, and his vision moving forward?
It's to continue darts gaining the respect it deserves. It's throwing away the preconceptions of the sport that existed from the previous version of the sport. This isn't darts 2.0 now. This is darts 3.0. Like 1.0 was the 80s and everything that went with that, and that was great in its own time zone or time, period.
Time frame.
Yeah. And then 2.0 was the rebirth of the sport 20 years ago or so, and we're now in another level, and we're now going to carry on growing, carry on going global, and carry on getting the respect. It's so easy to laugh at darts. It's so easy for people to take the mickey out of it and have a cheap jibe at it. But it's wrong for them to do that, and it's our job to educate them, not in a patronising way, but just to show them what the product is now and why that they should treat it with the same level of respect as they treat other sports. Because in so many cases, it delivers in audience numbers, broadcast numbers, return for sponsors, enjoyment levels for fans. Like, there's a thing called a net promoter score, which is where fans are asked their opinion, and it's like when someone says, would you recommend this company 10 out of 10 or 1 out of 10 or whatever? And our net promoter score is the highest in the UK of every sports rights holder. Right? Nobody would recommend their own sport or their own product as much as our fans would recommend the PDC. And there's no greater compliment to what we're delivering than that. So that's great. We've got there. Now, how can we stay there and how can we keep going? Because otherwise it's wasted. If you get somewhere and then you just let it fall away again, then that's on you.
Would you say you're at all frightened maybe by the thought of the PDC or your version of 3.0 outgrowing you, in the sense that you might have to bring in younger people again to give it a new idea, to find the next Matt Porter that can help you?
I'm very
look at it with fresh eyes.
I'm very aware of that, and it's not just staff, but everybody has a shelf life. Everybody has a shelf life in what they're doing. And I've already been doing this job now for, I've been CEO of the PDC since January 2008. It's a long time. It's a long time. And it's the nature of the company that I work for is that people serve it for a long period of time in the same sort of role. So I'm not worried about that. But there will come a time when it's outgrown me, or I'm too old for it, or I don't have the same burning desire or whatever. It's not there yet, and it's nowhere near there yet. But I'm very conscious of the need to be aware enough to have that. And I think that also, as an individual, I think that also helps you leave with dignity and on your own terms. It can get quite awkward. I'm sure we've all seen it where somebody's, for want of a better phrase, outstayed their welcome. You need to, as an individual, you need to have that strength to put your hands up and go, that's me now. That's me. Because it's not a criticism of you. It's just that the product changes. Everything evolves, and if you don't evolve and don't recognise your evolution, then you're letting the product down.
I'm not saying Matt, it's time for you yet to go, Matt.
I'm still enjoying it. Give me another week.
Yeah, listen, Matt, you're making the money, right? So you are going nowhere, my friend.
Yeah, but there's more to Leon. Do you know what? The money's good, but the money doesn't come if the product isn't right. The product comes first, and then the money will follow. And then if you don't use the money wisely, then the product will suffer as well. So the profit's great, but there's so much of our activity that doesn't deliver a profit, but we still do it. There's so many events that lose money because they're there for the players' development. Our community scheme costs a lot of money. Our youth development costs a lot of money. So the profit is obviously important, but the profit is there to fuel the development of the sport. And we can't lose sight of that. Otherwise, we're not doing the sport a service. And it deserves that service because of where it's come from.
Well, Matt, we will be looking on with great interest. You can definitely expect to see me, Will, and we're going to bring Mauro with us as well down to Ali Pali, or maybe we'll be over in Saudi Arabia. Yeah. Who knows? But we'll certainly be cheering you on. We really appreciate your time on Power and Purpose with us. You've been a fantastic guest. I've got so many notes I've got in front of me from all the pearls of wisdom, and just your drive, determination and vision, importantly, has really, really been super impressive. I know our community of listeners and those watching are going to be super happy and impressed with everything that we've had to share here. So big thank you for your time. Big thank you for coming on Power and Purpose. We really appreciate you, Matt, and good luck with everything going forward.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys too. Thank you for having me on. I've enjoyed it.